everyone, welcome to Quilt Talk Tuesday. My name is Tina Dillard with Quilting Affection Designs. Today we are going to talk about we're going to sew on the binding that we made last week, and we're going to finish up our strip binding that we made last week. I'm sorry, I'm a little off right now because some things are not looking right on my Facebook page, so I'm going to deal with that as I'm going. So I'm hoping you can all hear me and everything. So last week we discussed how to make the strip binding, and so this week we're going to continue with that talk with part 2 of sewing it on the quilt. And there's a certain way I do it, and I use the binding tool by TQM Products. This product is really nice to make for joining our ends and at when they meet at the very end. So I'm going to walk you through on how to do this. So we're going to finish up that whole quilting 101 today with doing that. So let's get started, because this is going to probably take a bit longer than I usually do. So let me kick off my shoes a little bit and let's get started. So right now I am going to flip back to my quilt. This is the quilt we've been working on. This is my Island Boutique project for the month, and we're going to work with this. So with the binding tool, it gives you written instructions on how to use it. So you're going to follow the instructions all the way through. You got to remember to have the writing facing you at all times when you're working with this tool. So what we're going to do is we're going to walk through the instructions, and I'm going to use my marking pencil and my ruler. So I'm going to take it from the beginning, right in the middle of my quilt, but I always do, and towards the end of my edge of my quilt here. So I'm going to estimate, just kind of eyeball a little bit here, and I'm going to mark 12 inches like it says on our ruler. And we're going to leave a 12-inch opening, and we're going to need to leave the tail of the binding 10 inches. So, and I'm going to mark one there and one there. So this will be my beginning mark, and this will be my end mark. So now that I have those marks, I'm going to take my pins and I'm going to mark those marks. And I'm going to refresh my screen real quick because it doesn't seem to be refreshing very well. So, and playing. So I'm hoping everything's going right. So now I'm going to make and mark a 10-inch mark. This is for my tail, so I know where I'm going to start my tail. Roughly about there. So I'm going to let these sit to the side, out of my way. And I'm going to take the end of my binding strip, now with the raw edge facing you. You're going to post in here. And you're going to pin right on that 12-inch mark. So now we have it started. This pin here means that this is where we're going to finish as we get done sewing. So I'm going to pin a couple rows down, and we're going to line up our binding straight on the edge. And I'm just going to take a couple more pins and just to get this started. Now you're going to set your machine up with your walking foot. The walking foot will guide you, all of this, the batting and the fabric, your quilt sandwich now, all the way through. And it's going to make it flow a little bit easier and won't get caught as much. So I'm going to set a few things to the side including my binding tool. And we won't need this until we get to the end now. And there we go. I don't see any comments. So if you have any comments or suggestions or anything, please go ahead and leave them in the comment section. So we are now ready to start sewing. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now I've put a camera in front of my sewing machine so you can see me stitching as best as I can do it. I may adjust the one above me when we get to a corner point. So just to let you know, I'm going to dump all of this on the floor, away from me. I don't want it in my lap. I just want it away so I can actually sew with it, not in my area. And I made my machine click at me, and I'm going to lay this flat. I'll make that tail sit behind me. And we're going to begin sewing here shortly. Let me change my camera views again for you. And I think we've got it. Red, blue. I want to turn that one off. Black. Okay. This is the one I want to have above me. So I'm hoping you guys can see. Okay. And I know this moves. I have to have my son work on that. So now you can see me sewing and working with the quilt. So my walking foot already has a 1/4 inch mark on it. So you may have one that does that. I'm not sure. It depends on your brand of sewing machine. So I'm going to I'm going to line my needle up right with that 12-inch mark that I marked with my pin earlier. And I'm going to drop my needle right there. What I did was I marked, and also with the 1/4 inch mark on my foot, I gave you a 1/4 inch from the edge of the quilt. So you're going to sew a 1/4 inch away, like we've always done when we're quilting. We've always done a 1/4 inch. So we're going to begin slowly, taking a few stitches and then going back. And now we're going to go ahead and start sewing. Now, we're going to keep making sure our binding is lined up with the edge of our quilt. And we're going to keep sewing. Bring some binding up. And another trick is to make sure that you're sewing a straight line with your binding, is to make sure that your binding and your quilt line up directly in front of you, so you're not slided this way or this way. You're straight, completely straight, and holding it tight, not really tight, but kind of a taunt, a little light, so it doesn't slip. So we're going to continue sewing. And you don't want to go too fast, especially if you're just starting. Just a moderate speed will work. Now you're going to come to the end. You're going to leave about a 1/4 inch. You're going to stop a 1/4 inch from that edge. And so I stopped a 1/4 inch, and I'm going to back up. Give it a reinforcement. Now I'm going to lift my needle up, and I'm going to pull away from the machine. We are now going to rotate our quilt, and I'm going to lay this so you can see it also. I'm going to lay my binding down straight. I'm going to grab my finger, and I'm going to work it up so you can get nice diagonal line from the corner here down on your binding strip. You're going to give it a nice finger press, and then you're going to bring down that binding. To show you that again, you're going to go straight, then you're going to bring it up so it lays up, and that'll help you get your 45-degree angle. And we're going to go down. So I'm hoping you could see that pretty good. And we're going to start when we put our foot underneath the quilt underneath our machine here. We're going to do it 1/4 of an inch again. So you're going to make sure your threads are in the back. And you're going to make sure your foot is marked at the 1/4 of an inch, and you're going to eyeball that 1/4 of an inch. What you could do also is just mark it with a ruler. Just a light little mark, and you can start. Now that I have my corner all matched up, I'm going to go start, and I'm going to reverse it a little bit just to reinforce that edge. Just in case when you flip it over, the stitches don't work up. We want a nice tight corner here. So I'm going to start sewing. So that's how you do your corner. And once we get further on here, you can probably see it. This is the corner that we just did. And we're going to be sewing this on the front. I forgot to tell you that. I'm sorry. We're going to sew it onto the front because once we get towards the end and we sew the ends together, we will flip it over with some binding clips, and we're going to hand sew on the back. So that's what your corner would look like. Just like that. A nice 45-degree angle edge. So let's continue on, and once we get to the next corner, I show you it again how to do that. I'm going to take you to my other quilt that is ready for the end, and my machine's being slow. And I'm going to show you how to do the end on that, because it would take me an hour, a little bit. My machine's acting a little funky to do that. So let's continue on. Keeps telling me the bobbin's empty, and it's a brand new bobbin, so I'm dealing with it as we go. So you're going to keep going, working down, keeping that binding edge straight, and we're almost to the end of this edge. So I was just making sure that there was no comments. We are almost to the end here. And now I've gone to the end where I made my 1/4 of an inch line on my walking foot. So I'm going to go back, reverse, reinforce those stitches, and I'm going to pull my needle up and pull it out. So again, to show you how to do the corner piece, you're going to take your binding, you're going to work it up so it goes straight up in front of you or straight ahead of you. And you're going to, from the corner of your quilt, you're going to work down for a 45-degree angle. You're going to hold that with your fingers, and you're going to fold that binding down one more time. And voila, you have a nice corner. Again, you'll pin that piece, and then you're going to start from a 1/4 of an inch from one edge, from both edges. So from the top, it will be 1/4 of an inch, and from the side, a 1/4 of an inch. You're going to reinforce, take a few stitches, reinforce those stitches, and sew this corner. You'll repeat on the other corners also. So let's go ahead and jump over to our finished quilt that is ready to be the binding to be finished. So I'm going to need my rotary cutter and I'm going to have my mat. So I'm going to bring my mat and put it underneath my quilt here. And I'm going to switch screens again on you. You should be able to see. I'm going to move this back over. So, there we go. So, this one is the Spider-Man quilt I have been working on. And we need to join our ends. We have our 10-inch tail on this end, and we have whatever's left on this end of our quilt. So, for some reason, so there we go. That's better. So I'm going to take my 2 pins out. We don't need these until I start doing our sewing together. This doesn't take that long, and it goes fairly fast. So we're going to read the instructions on our quilt here. And what it tells you to do for your next step, and I got to turn it around, is you're going to butt the flat edge of your tool where you stopped sewing. So from this side, and we're going to make sure, and it does tell you on this ruler, have the print size always up. So you're going to make sure your print side is always up. It has an L for your left and for your R for your right. And this is your marking line. It does give you nice illustrations for each of the steps also. So what we're going to do is we're going to do what number 2 is telling you, is to butt up the edge to where you're finished on your quilt. So we're going to go ahead and do that. And I need my marking pencil again. And I'm going to kind of pull that straight. Make sure my tool is underneath. It's butted up on my edge of my quilt binding here. And I'm going to line it up with that mark. This mark is now one of my marks. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. And we're going to butt it up on this edge. And we are going to mark both sides. So now we have our ends marked. Don't need our marking pencil anymore. So now it tells you in step 3 for the right sides to line up. You're on the mark right here on this mark. So for this side, I'm going to open up my binding, kind of push this back away, and we're going to line up the ruler and the ruler right on that mark So the ruler is exactly 2.5. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the rotary cutter and we're going to follow the outside of this ruler here and make our first cut. So you're going to cut that tail in also. So you have a nice clean edge. So now for the other side, you're going to line up that mark that we made, and you're going to line it up like it says on the ruler here, to line it up at the tip of our quilt, or the marking lines that we made. So we're going to line it up. So you can see that I'm lining it up on that white mark there. And I've got it pretty level because I'm lining it up straight on the straight edge here. I'm going to open my rotary cutter and I'm going to cut that edge off. And voila, another one done. So we don't need those anymore. That's all you use this ruler for, is to do those ends. So when I need to pull this together, and we're going to line up our ends of our quilt here. Now I'm going to use some pins to reinforce these. We're going to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance. To sew our seam. And I want one more because I want to line up the ends down here also. So okay, so with that stuff done, this is now ready. I am going to sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance across this diagonal line. When we get to that point, we are going to open it up, and you can see that just laying it down here, once we get those seam lines, it's going to be nice and straight. It's going to be perfect size for our quilt. So let's go ahead and do our seam allowance, and we're going to gently hand press these seams open, and then we're going to sew our quilt down. So I'm going to bring this over. It's a big quilt. So I'm going to be dealing with a little bit bigger on the quilt size here. Let me refresh my page again. So, and I'm going to be using my white thread because I don't want to change threads right now because it's going to take too much time. But I am going to see what's going on with this. Stick that underneath there again. Okay, I was just checking my binding, a bobbin real quick. So you're gonna work your seam underneath, and you're gonna sew a 1/4 inch seam allowance. So now with this foot, I'm a little high. There we go. So I'm gonna sew my 1/4 inch seam allowance. I'm doing this really slowly because the fabric does give, because it's on the bias, and I'm going to sew all the way across. So I'm going to pull that out. We are now going to open up our seam. Just going to finger press that seam open. And then I'm going to go and fold my seam closed again. And now I'm going to lay my whole quilt down, and I'm going to pin it down. So you can see that we have a perfect size for our quilt. So let's go ahead and sew this on. So I need to I'm going to pin this middle section here just to hold it in place. And that's how easy to use the binding tool is. You can purchase the binding tool through Amazon. Now, I'm not endorsed or affiliated with them. I just fell in love with this. I watched Missouri Star Quilt, Jenny Doan use it, and I decided to try it, and that's the only thing I use is for my quilting is this tool for the binding. I had so much non-success before with quilts not matching up right or my binding not matching right, and since I've been using this tool, it has become my to-go tool for binding. And we're almost done binding this quilt. So now I'm going to reinforce that, and voila, my quilt top is completely sewn on. Trim those threads, and now that I've got that done, I'm going to show you how to use the binding clips and get your quilt started. So basically, you're going to turn your quilt binding over to the back. And you're going to pull it taut, and you're going to put your binding clip on. The binding clip on that holds your binding while you are stitching. And it doesn't really matter which way you're going. You just go ahead and sew it on. So if you're going to do, like I usually start at this end for the quilt. So what I do is I usually bind it all the way around before I start binding. So I'm going to grab some black thread, and you can buy binding needles from various different stores, and I really recommend using a thimble with this also. And you want a sturdy needle that will give you some good stitches. So you're going to thread that, get a knot, so what you're going to do, and I'm going to do it right here, is you're going to start, and I'm going to start right here at this end. Now I have a knot at the end. You're going to take, and you're just going to work your stitches all the way across. And you can see that it's starting to hold. Now I probably do it a little bit different from other people. You can, there's different type of stitches you can use. So you're just going to continue. You're going to go up underneath your fabric and through the binding, then down, grab some threads, and back up. That's all you're doing. So when you get down to your corner, what you're going to do is you're going to pull it straight, and then you're going to lay your binding down, just like so, and then you're going to stitch from your corner down. You can leave it, but when you do a quilt show, you're going to need to tuck those edges down. You're going to need to tack those edges down. So I really recommend that. So what I do here is I sew all the way across, Then I grab my threads underneath here. I'm just pretending here, certainly. And we're going to lay that down. And you need to, and you can see that once I lay that down and hold that, and you may want to use a pin or something here. And you want to get a nice corner, 45, and you can start stitching from here. Also. So that's how you would do that, and just tack that. So that's how you would stitch all the way around on your quilt for binding. So, not seeing any comments. If you have comments after the show, please go ahead and leave them. That's fine. I will answer them as soon as I can get back to my Facebook. I usually answer them within the 12 hours of time. So we've gone through the whole Quilting Basics 101 series. So now we are going to start next month with some different ideas. So next week I'm going to be gone. So I'll be in Studio 180 design training. So I won't have a Facebook Live then. But the following week I will be back and we'll do some catching up. We'll just have a catch up time, answer question time. The following week we're going to do some introduction into our quilt along that I'm going to be starting on August 14th. The quilt along is the pattern on the wall behind me. Oh, come on. How about this? We'll just turn this way. This one right here, called Rainbow Serenade. This one uses, let me get up and walk over there. It uses the Studio 180 Tucker trimmer and the corner pop tools. Both tools can be used on my pattern, on my wall. You can buy them on my website and everything, and along with the pattern. Those will be required for this pattern. You can also purchase them through the Studio 180 Design website also. Okay, the lady's just commenting that she can't hear it very well because she's using her headphones in the hospital. So we're going to do the quilt along starting August 14th. You can also purchase my pattern there also, and on my website also lists all the fabrics that are used in this quilt. So you can also find that information there. I will be posting more information starting next week on the quilt along. So make sure and I have the description, and the description area of this post is the link to my website and everything else. So that's Rainbow Serenade. We're going to start that with quilt along August 14th. It's going to be a once a month quilt along, and we're going to, so everybody can work on their blocks each for the month. So that is it for this one. Just to remind you that you can sign up for my newsletter. I'll be announcing that in my newsletter also on the quilt along. So I think that is everything. Oh, be sure to check out my Twitch channel if you want to watch me stitch all for about 3-4 hours, and you can sit and sew along, and we can sit and chat back and forth. So when I get back, I will be starting that up again also. So thank you for joining me for this Quilt Talk Tuesday as we finished up the Quilting Basics 101. And if you missed last week's episode, it is posted on YouTube and right here on my Facebook page. So I will see you when I get back And I will be posting more information on my Facebook page about the quilt along. See you all later. Goodbye.